The snow hit without warning. 1 second the road was clear, the next, the windshield went completely white. The tires lost grip. The truck slid. Nora's hand seized my arm so hard I felt her nails through my jacket. "Marcus, stop." No signal, no other cars, just wind screaming through the mountain pass and the road disappearing fast behind us. Then the headlights caught it, barely visible through the trees. A cabin. Dark. Abandoned. No smoke, no lights, no signs of life. Nora's voice dropped to almost nothing. "We have to." We grabbed what we could and ran. Neither of us knew that pushing open that door would change everything between us forever. Before we continue, we want to welcome you from the heart. We don't know if you came here by chance, out of curiosity, or because you needed to hear something different today. But we're glad you're on the other side of the screen. Stay with us, get comfortable, and join us in this story. The snow came out of nowhere. 1 second the road was clear, 2 lanes of dark asphalt cutting through the mountain pass. Headlights steady, Nora's voice reading me trivia questions from her phone, because that was how we did long drives. 6 years of friendship, and we still hadn't run out of useless facts to throw at each other. Then the windshield went white, not gradually, not the slow, cinematic kind of snowfall that makes people in movies reach across the center console and do something they'll either regret or spend the rest of their lives being glad about. This was instant. A wall of it. The wipers couldn't keep up. I felt the rear tires lose grip before my brain registered what was happening, and the truck slid sideways across the center line like it had simply decided the lane suggestion didn't apply anymore. Nora's hand seized my arm. Her nails went through my jacket. "Marcus, stop the car." I already had both feet on the brake, which was the wrong instinct on ice, and I knew that, so I let off and steered into the slide the way my father had taught me in an empty parking lot when I was 16. The truck corrected. Barely. We stopped half on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking orange into the storm. For a moment, neither of us moved. The engine was still running. Outside, the wind hit the truck in waves, rocking it slightly, and the world beyond the glass had become a solid white nothing. "Signal?" I said. Nora checked her phone. 0 bars. I checked mine. Same. Here is what I knew. We were somewhere between mile marker 31 and the turnoff for the resort, on a road that the weather app had rated as moderate risk 3 hours ago when we left. The rest of our group had taken the other car and left 40 minutes ahead of us because Nora had forgotten her recorder in the cabin, and we'd gone back for it. The recorder was sitting in the cup holder between us, small and black, and completely responsible for everything that was about to happen, though neither of us knew that yet. "We can't stay on the road," Nora said. Her voice was steady. That was one of the things about her. She got quieter when things got bad, not louder. "Someone will come around that curve and not see us." She was right. I put the truck in park and grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment. When I pushed the door open, the wind hit me like something with a grudge. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees since we'd left the resort. Snow drove sideways into my face, the kind that stings. I swept the flashlight along the tree line. That was when I saw it, maybe 30 yards off the road, through a gap in the pines, a shape. Dark, rectangular, a structure of some kind. No lights in the windows, no smoke from what might have been a chimney. But it was solid, and it was shelter, and the alternative was sitting in the truck on a blind mountain curve, hoping nobody came around it fast. I got back in and pulled the door shut against the wind. "There's a cabin," I said. "Off the road, through the trees. Looks abandoned, Nora looked at me. Snow was already crusting on her hair from the 2 seconds the door had been open. In the orange flicker of the hazard lights, she looked like someone who was doing very careful math and not loving the answer. Abandoned, she repeated. Abandoned, but standing. She looked at the white wall of the windshield, then back at me. Okay, she said. Okay. Grab the bag from the back. We moved fast. I shouldered the overnight bag someone had packed for the weekend and took Nora's hand on the ice because the footing was bad, and that was a practical decision, and not at all something I had thought about for 6 years. She held on tight, and we ran for the trees. The cabin door wasn't locked. It wasn't much of a door, old wood, swollen in the frame, the kind that opened with a shoulder more than a handle. I pushed it open and we stumbled inside. The cold followed us in. I raised the flashlight and swept it around the room. One room. Stone fireplace on the far wall, dark and cold. A wooden table with 2 chairs. A shelf with something on it I couldn't make out yet. And in the corner, against the wall, a bed. One. Narrow iron frame. A folded blanket on top that had probably been there since before either of us was born. Nora saw it at the same time I did. The wind screamed against the outside wall. Somewhere above us, the roof creaked. She turned to look at me in the beam of the flashlight, snow melting in her hair, cheeks red from the cold, and said absolutely nothing. Neither did I. Nora tried her phone 4 more times. I counted. Not because I was keeping score, but because watching her hold it up at different angles toward the ceiling like signal was something that pooled in corners was the only thing keeping me from thinking too hard about the bed in the corner. Nothing, she said, finally dropping her arm. Nothing, I confirmed. She looked around the cabin with the calm, assessing expression she used when a situation required organizing before panicking. I had seen that face during a power outage in her apartment, during a canceled flight in Denver, and once during a very bad first date she had texted me through in real time. It meant she was still in control. It also meant she was working hard to stay that way. I moved to the fireplace. Whoever had used this cabin last had left a stack of dry wood beside the hearth, enough for a night if we were careful. I found old newspaper folded under the grate, brittle and yellowed, and a box of matches on the mantel with 4 matches left inside. 4 matches. I made all of them count. Oh, the fire caught on the 3rd try. Small at first, cautious, like it wasn't sure we deserved warmth yet. Then it found the wood and opened up into something real. Nora crouched beside me, holding her hands toward it, and for a moment we just existed inside the sound of it, the crack and settle, the wind outside doing its worst against walls that had apparently survived worse. Okay, she said. Inventory. This was also very Nora. When she couldn't fix the situation, she cataloged it. The cabin had 1 fireplace, now operational, 1 iron bed with 1 blanket that smelled like cedar and thyme, 1 wooden table, 2 chairs, the overnight bag I had grabbed from the truck which contained 1 change of clothes for each of us, her recorder, 2 granola bars, and half a bottle of water. It also had, on the shelf beside the window, a deck of playing cards in a cardboard box so old the corners had gone soft. Nora found them while I was rationing the granola bars. She turned the box over in her hands, blew a layer of dust off the top, and slid the cards out. They were complete. Worn smooth from years of handling, the kind of cards that had absorbed 100 evenings of other people's conversations. She looked at me across the small room. We could play, she said. Sure. I pulled the 2 chairs closer to the fire. What are we betting? Because I left my wallet in the truck, not money. She sat down, already shuffling with the easy confidence of someone who had spent too many Friday nights at kitchen tables. The cards moved through her fingers like she was born holding them. Truths. I stopped arranging my chair. Truths, I repeated. You lose a hand, you answer a question. Honestly. She squared the deck and set it on the table between us. No deflecting, no subject changes, no giving me the version you practiced. Outside, the wind hit the cabin wall hard enough to rattle the window in its frame. The fire popped. Somewhere in the dark above us, a beam settled with a low groan. I looked at the cards, then at her. The firelight moved across her face, catching the edges of things, the curve of her cheek, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a hiking trip 3 years ago, the way she was watching me with that expression that meant she already knew something I hadn't figured out yet. 6 years. 6 years of Fridays and bad movies and driving each other to airports and knowing exactly how the other one took their coffee. 6 years of being the safest person in each other's lives. I should have said no. Deal, I said. The corner of her mouth lifted. She reached for the deck. What I did not notice, what neither of us noticed, was the small black recorder she had set on the shelf beside the window when she found the cards. The same recorder we had gone back for. The one with the red light on its side that meant it was running. It had been on since she picked it up from the cabin floor. It was still on now. The first hand I lost on purpose. Not obviously, I wasn't going to insult her by throwing cards like a man trying to seem harmless. I just didn't play my best. And when she laid down 3 of a kind, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had been waiting, I set my cards face down and said, "Ask." She thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. What are you most afraid of right now? I expected the cabin, the storm, the fact that nobody knew where we were and the temperature outside was still dropping. Those were the reasonable answers. Saying something I can't take back, I said instead. She absorbed that without comment, which was worse than any follow-up question she could have asked. She just shuffled the cards again, fingers moving, and dealt the second hand. I won the second round. Fairly. Okay, I said. The podcast. The one you've been working on for 3 months? What's the episode actually about? Her hands slowed on the table. Things people don't say, she said. The stuff that sits in your chest for years because the timing is never right, or the risk feels too big, or you just keep thinking there'll be a better moment. She looked at the fire instead of me. I've been interviewing people about their biggest unsaid thing. And yours? I asked. What's yours? She met my eyes then. Something passed through her expression quick, almost invisible, like a card palmed before you see what it is. I haven't recorded mine yet, she said. She picked up the deck and dealt the third hand before I could push further. The third hand she lost. Genuinely, this time I saw it in the way she held her cards slightly too tight and looked at them slightly too long. Nora was competitive in the way that made losing feel architectural, like something had to be restructured afterward. She set her cards down slowly. I leaned forward. Have you ever wanted to be more than my best friend? The fire chose that exact moment to drop. Not dramatically, just one log settling into another, a soft collapse that sent a brief shower of sparks up the chimney and took the light in the room down a full degree. The shadows moved in from the corners. Nora didn't look away from me. She didn't answer either. She just sat there in the diminishing firelight, cards face down on the table, and let the silence stretch out between us like something she was measuring. Her expression was unreadable in the way that only happened when she was being very, very careful. Then, the last strong flame guttered. We need more wood, she said quietly. We both knew there was no more wood. I got up and added the last 2 pieces of wood to the fire. It wasn't enough, and we both knew it. The flames took the new wood slowly, reluctantly, the way you accept help from someone when you're already too far gone for it to matter. The room would be cold in an hour, maybe less. Nora hadn't moved from her chair. The cards were still on the table between us, face down, the question still hanging in the air above them like smoke that had nowhere to go. I stayed crouched by the hearth, longer than I needed to. "I write letters," I said. "To the fire, not to her. When something matters and I can't figure out how to say it out loud, I write it down. Long ones, sometimes. Full drafts." I picked up a piece of bark from the floor and fed it to the flame. I never send them. Behind me, I heard her chair shift. "Who do you write them to?" "People I don't want to lose." I paused. "People I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing to." The fire popped once. Outside, the wind had dropped slightly, not gone, just resting. I thought about the night 3 years ago when her relationship ended, the one she had actually believed in. She had called me at 11, and I had driven to her apartment without asking why, and she had opened the door already crying, which was the only time in 6 years I had ever seen her cry without trying to stop herself first. We sat on her kitchen floor until 2 in the morning. I made tea she didn't drink. She talked until she ran out of words. And then we just sat there, her shoulder against mine, the apartment quiet around us. I had wanted to tell her then. I had the words. They were right there. I didn't use them because she was broken open, and I was not going to be the thing that complicated her healing. That was what I told myself. The cleaner truth was that I was afraid. That the risk of losing what we already had felt unsurvivable in a way I didn't have language for yet. So I went home and wrote a letter instead. I still had it. Marcus. Her voice came from right behind me, closer than I expected. I turned, and she was standing, not sitting. She must have crossed the room while I was looking at the fire. She was holding my jacket, which I had draped over the back of her chair earlier. "I was looking for the lighter," she said. "In your pocket." She wasn't looking at the jacket anymore. She was looking at what was in her other hand, an envelope, white, slightly worn at the corners from months of being carried, her name on the front in my handwriting. Nora. Just that. No last name, no address, because it was never going anywhere. Her eyes came up to mine. "Marcus?" she said again, softer this time. "What is this?" There are moments when lying is still technically available as an option, but your body has already decided against it. My mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. So I just stood there while Nora held the envelope with both hands, like she wasn't sure whether to give it back or keep going. "It's what it looks like," I said finally. She turned it over, looked at the back. Unsealed. She could have opened it right there, and I wouldn't have stopped her because I had run completely out of the energy it takes to protect yourself from something you've been carrying for a long time. "How long have you had this?" she asked. 8 months. Her eyes came up. 8 months. I write them and I keep them. I told you that. You told me you wrote letters. You didn't tell me you wrote them to me. She set it carefully on the table beside the cards, which felt almost ceremonial, like she was treating it as evidence. "Marcus, have there been others?" I looked at the fire. "Yes," I said. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Not angry, I knew what angry Nora looked like, and this wasn't it. This was something more careful. More dangerous, maybe, because I couldn't predict it. "Say it out loud," she said. "Whatever's in that envelope, just say it." So I did. Not all of it. The letter was 4 pages, and some of it was written at 2 in the morning with the particular honesty that only comes when you're too tired to edit yourself. And some of it I was not ready to hand her all at once. But the center of it, the part that had been true since long before I wrote it down, that being her best friend was the best thing in my life, and also the hardest. That there were 100 small moments I had categorized as nothing because the alternative was admitting they were everything. That I had watched her laugh across rooms at parties and felt something I had no clean name for and had gotten very good at not examining too closely. When I finished, the cabin was very quiet. Nora sat down on the edge of the bed. Not dramatically, just like her legs had made a quiet, executive decision. She looked at her hands in her lap for a long moment. "I've been working on this podcast for 3 months," she said slowly. "About things people never say. The unsaid things." She paused. "I have 42 interviews recorded. 42 people telling me about words they swallowed and moments they let pass." She looked up. "I have been interviewing everyone except myself, because yours involves me," I said. She didn't confirm it. She didn't have to. She stood up and crossed the room to the shelf by the window. Her hand reached toward the recorder, that small black device, sitting there in the dark, red light still burning, patient as anything. Her fingers hovered over it. Then she stopped. She turned back to me, and in the last weak light of the dying fire, her expression was the most unguarded I had ever seen it. 6 years of knowing her face, and I had never seen it look quite like this. Like something had been removed. Like she had put down something heavy and wasn't sure yet if her hands remembered how to be empty. "There's something you should know first," she said, "before I play anything, before any of that." The last flame shrank to an ember. The room went dark. The dark was immediate. Not the comfortable dark of a room with curtains drawn, or a city night with light bleeding in from somewhere. This was mountain dark, the kind that has weight to it, that presses against your eyes until you stop expecting them to adjust. The fire was completely gone. The window showed nothing but black, and the pale suggestion of snow still moving outside. I could hear Nora breathing. She was close, maybe 4 feet away, somewhere between the shelf and the bed, but I couldn't see her. I heard her shift her weight, heard her exhale slowly, the kind of breath that means someone is deciding something. "Nora," I said. "What did you want to tell me?" Silence. "Then I've been trying to tell you for 2 years. Her voice was steady but stripped of its usual edges. No humor in it. No deflection, just the sentence, plain and open. Every time I got close, I talked myself out of it. I told myself the friendship was worth more than the risk, that you'd been through enough with the breakup, that the timing was wrong." A pause. "There's always a reason if you need one badly enough." I didn't say anything. I had spent 6 years being very good at filling silences around her, and right now I had nothing. Just my own heartbeat, which had become unreasonably loud in the darkness. "I'm not playing the recording," she said. "Not tonight. Whatever's on it, that's not how I want you to hear it." Another pause. Shorter. I'd rather just say it. Then say it. The cabin groaned in the wind. Somewhere outside, a branch came down heavy with snow and hit the ground. She said it. I won't write it here the way it came out of her mouth, because some things lose something in the transcription, in the flattening that happens when you move a voice into words on a page. What I will say is that it was 6 years of careful distance collapsed into 2 sentences, and that she said it like someone finally setting down something they had been carrying through every room they had ever walked into together. The cold was serious now. I could feel it coming through the walls, through the floor, settling into the room like it lived there, and we were the guests. I heard her move. The old blanket pulled back from the bed. The iron frame shifted slightly. Then her voice, just above a whisper. "Get in. I'm freezing." 3 words, then 3 more. Simple and enormous and nothing like a question. I stood in the dark for 3 full seconds. I know because I counted them without meaning to, the way you count anything when your brain needs something to do while the rest of you catches up. 1. 6 years of letters I never sent. 2. Every room I had ever watched her walk into. 3. I crossed the floor in the dark and found the edge of the bed by touch. She was sitting on the edge of the bed. I knew because my hand found her shoulder before anything else, the soft weight of it, the wool of her sweater, the fact that she was shaking slightly in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. I sat down beside her. Close. The iron frame was narrow enough that there was no version of this that involved distance. For a moment we just existed in the dark together. 2 people on the edge of something that had been a long time building. "I've thought about this," I said. "About telling you. More times than I'm comfortable admitting." "How many times?" "Nora." "Ballpark?" Despite everything, I almost laughed. 6 years. She could still do that in the middle of anything, often enough that I have a whole filing system for the reasons I didn't. She was quiet for a moment. "What were the reasons?" "Timing. Your last relationship. Mine. The friendship. The fact that if I was wrong about what I thought I saw in you, I would have to find a way to keep being your best friend from the other side of the most humiliating conversation of my life." I paused. Mostly that last one. "You weren't wrong," she said quietly. "About what you saw." There it was, plain and undressed, and sitting between us in the dark. I reached for her hand, and found it already reaching for mine. The first time I kissed Nora Callahan, it was completely dark, and the cabin was cold enough that I could feel the temperature of her cheek against my palm when I raised my hand to her face. She leaned into it the way you lean into something you have been waiting for long enough that the waiting has become its own kind of ache. I kissed her carefully, the way you approach anything you've wanted badly enough to be afraid of. She kissed me back like she was done being careful. Her hand came up to the front of my jacket, and the careful version of this ended. It became something else, warmer and less measured, and 6 years of practiced restraint coming apart at once. When we finally separated, neither of us moved very far. Her forehead came to rest against mine. I could feel her breathing evening out slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I agreed. For a while, neither of us said anything else. The wind outside had dropped to something lower, less aggressive, more like weather than an argument. The cabin was cold but manageable under the blanket she had pulled around both of us at some point, without me fully registering when. Then Nora went very still. I felt it before she said anything, the subtle change in her body, the slight shift of attention away from me and toward something else. "Marcus?" "Yeah." "The recorder." Her voice had changed. Not bad changed, complicated changed. "I set it on the shelf when I found the cards. I never turned it off. I thought about this. How long has it been running?" She did the math quietly, since approximately the second hand of cards. I thought about everything we had said since the second hand of cards, the truths traded across a worn deck, the letter, the things she had said in the dark, the things I had said back, all of it sitting on that small black device on the shelf across the room. "Nora," I said. "I know." "I know, Marcus." A beat of silence. Then she started laughing quietly at first, then less quietly, her face pressed into my shoulder, shaking with it. I held on and felt the laugh move through both of us. Of all the ways this night could have gone, somehow this felt exactly right. I woke up before she did. This was not unusual. I had always been an early riser in the way that feels less like a virtue and more like an inconvenience, awake before the alarm, before the light, before there was any good reason to be conscious. What was unusual was where I was. The narrow iron bed, the weight of the old blanket, the sound of wind that had finally softened overnight into something almost gentle. And Nora, asleep with her cheek against my shoulder and one hand loosely curled against my chest. I stayed very still. Outside the window, the sky had shifted from black to the particular gray-blue that means dawn is coming but hasn't committed yet. Snow had stopped falling at some point in the night. The world beyond the glass was white and quiet and completely indifferent to everything that had happened inside these four walls. I looked at the shelf across the room. The recorder was still there. Red light still on. At some point, Nora stirred. I felt it before I saw it, a small adjustment of weight, a shift in her breathing. Then she went still in the deliberate way that meant she was awake and taking stock of things. I waited. After a moment, she tilted her head up and looked at me in the gray morning light. She didn't look uncertain. That was the thing I had been quietly afraid of, that daylight would bring a different version of her, one that needed distance, one that would organize last night into a category labeled mistake. Instead, she looked like someone who had slept well for the first time in a long time. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said back. She sat up slowly, pushing her hair out of her face. Looked at the window. Looked at the recorder on the shelf. Looked back at me. "I want to listen to it," she said. We sat on the edge of the bed together, shoulders touching, while she rewound the recorder to the second hand of cards and pressed play. Her voice came out of the small speaker first, asking me something about whether I'd ever regretted a decision I hadn't made. Then mine, answering in the careful way I answered things when I was trying not to answer them. We listened to the whole thing, the truth game, the letter. The things said in the dark, her voice and mine, overlapping and quiet, the wind audible underneath everything like a third presence in the room. I heard myself say things I didn't remember choosing to say. I heard her say things she had clearly been holding for a long time. When it ended, she reached over and clicked it off. Neither of us spoke for a moment. "That's the episode," she said finally. "Not a question. It doesn't have to be." "No." She turned the recorder over in her hands. "It does. It's the truest thing I've recorded." She paused. "I'll change the names. Give people some dignity." "Some?" I said. "Some?" she agreed. Then her phone lit up on the table beside the cards. One bar, then two. The messages came in fast, the delayed accumulation of a night without signal arriving all at once. Her phone. Mine. Our group chat exploding with the particular energy of people who have been worried and are now converting that worry into volume. She read over my shoulder. I read over hers. Then she looked at me with an expression that was half amusement and half something more serious. "They know we didn't make it back," she said. "They've been calling since midnight." She looked out the window at the stopped snow, the white road beginning to emerge through the trees. The world outside was waiting. People who knew us were waiting. "Ready?" she asked. I wasn't, entirely, but I was more ready than I'd been for anything in a long time. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." The truck started on the first try. I took this as a good sign. which was not something I usually did. I was not, by nature, a signs person. I was a check the weather app 3 times person, a read the contract twice person, a man who had spent 6 years writing letters instead of saying things because letters could be edited and moments couldn't. But the truck started, and the road down the mountain was passable, and Nora was in the passenger seat with her boots on the dashboard and the recorder in her lap, and something in me had quietly stopped bracing. She called her friends first. I listened to her end of it, the reassurances, the deflections, the way she said, "We're fine," with a particular emphasis on the "we" that I was fairly certain her friend caught, because there was a pause on the other end before the questions started. She handled them efficiently and hung up. "Your turn," she said. My group chat had 41 messages. I scrolled through them with one hand, while the other stayed on the wheel, concern escalating to worry, escalating to the kind of dark humor people use when they're scared and don't want to admit it. I sent a voice memo that said we were safe and on our way down, and that I would explain later, which was true in the way that true things are sometimes also deeply insufficient. We drove in the comfortable silence we had always been good at. The mountain road unwound ahead of us, the snow packed down and manageable in the pale morning light. Pine trees heavy with white on both sides. The lake appeared briefly between the tree line, frozen and silver, and then was gone. Halfway down, I pulled into a scenic overlook and stopped the truck. Nora looked at me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." I kept my eyes on the valley below, all winter light and dark ridgelines, and the small distant grid of a town at the base of the mountain. "I just want to say something while we're still here. Before we get back, and it becomes a thing people have opinions about." She waited. She was good at that. "Last night wasn't the storm," I said. "I need you to know that. It wasn't the dark or the cold or the fact that there was one bed and no other options. I've been carrying that letter for 8 months. I've been carrying what it says for longer." I looked at her then. "This is not something that happened to us. This is something I'm choosing." The valley sat below us, quiet and enormous. Nora looked at me for a long moment. The morning light was different from the firelight, clearer, less forgiving, the kind of light that shows things as they actually are. She looked, in it, exactly like herself. Exactly like the person I had been carefully not choosing for 6 years. "Drive, Marcus," she said softly. "We have time." 3 words. The opposite of every rushed, swallowed, too late thing I had ever let pass between us. I put the truck in drive. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in March, I was making coffee in our kitchen when the podcast dropped. Our kitchen. That was still new enough that I noticed it, the particular weight of that word, the way it had replaced mine without ceremony or announcement, just gradually becoming true the way most good things do. Her coffee mug was already on the counter. Her jacket was on the hook by the door. The recorder was on the shelf above the books, sitting exactly where it always sat now. Red light off, resting. I had known the episode was coming. She had told me the title weeks ago, Everything I Didn't Say, and I had nodded and not asked to hear it early because it was hers, and she would share it when she was ready. That was something I had learned, or maybe relearned, in the months since January. That choosing someone doesn't mean needing to hold every part of them at once. Sometimes it means making room. My phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from her podcast app. New episode. I picked it up. Her voice came through the small speaker in the way it always did, warm and unhurried. The voice that apparently made people feel like she was talking only to them, which I had heard described in reviews but had never fully understood until I was one of those people. She talked first about the project, about the 42 interviews, about the pattern she had found in all of them, that the things people most regretted not saying were rarely the dramatic ones. Not the grand speeches. Not the ultimatums. The small, true things. The ones that felt too vulnerable to be worth the risk, until the risk of staying silent became larger. Then she said, "I have one more interview. I recorded it by accident, in a cabin in the mountains, during a blizzard, on a night when I finally ran out of reasons to stay quiet. I've changed some details, but the important things are true." I set the coffee down. Her voice continued, quieter now, telling a version of a story I already knew from the inside. A woman who had spent years recording other people's unsaid things while carefully guarding her own. A man who wrote letters he never sent. A storm that removed every available exit from a conversation that was 6 years overdue. She didn't use our names. She didn't need to. And then, near the end, after she had said what she had to say, she played the recording. My voice came out of the phone speaker, small and dark, the way voices sound when they've been captured without knowing it. The cabin acoustics underneath. The wind. And then me, saying the things I had said in the dark to a woman I couldn't see, in a room that was cold enough to make honesty feel like the only remaining source of warmth. I stood in our kitchen in the March light and listened to myself finally say the things I had been writing down and putting in envelopes for years. When it ended, the apartment was very quiet. I heard the key in the door. Nora came in with 2 paper bags and snow melting in her hair. March in Chicago being what it was, and stopped when she saw my face. She looked at my phone. At the podcast app, still open on the screen, she set the bags down slowly. She didn't ask if I had listened. She could tell. She crossed the kitchen, reached past me, and poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot I had just made. Then she sat down at the table and looked at me with the expression I had spent 6 years cataloging without admitting what I was doing. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. Some things don't need a word after them. Some things are complete. If you've ever had something you were afraid to say to someone who mattered, I'd like to hear about it. Leave it in the comments. And if this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who might need it. 2. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next story. There are more of them coming, more cabins, more letters, more people who almost didn't say the thing that changed everything. I'll see you in the next one.